Starting off this dark list, and at number 10 we have The Secret Farmhouse. A 25-year-old man escaped from a farmhouse and ran to the nearest public place, which happened to be a bar. He guzzled down 5 beers, and then he asked the bartender for help. He told him that he hasn't been outside for 9 years, and he's not the only one. Dutch police were called to the scene, where they found a secret staircase behind a cupboard that led them down to the basement. Inside this secret room, they found a man and his 6 children living inside of a small confined space. Some of these kids had no idea that the other people existed. They thought that they were the only ones left on Earth, and they were waiting for the world to end. But as it turns out, someone in their family was keeping them locked up in this secret farmhouse for 9 years. Is this real life right now? The police were unable to find their mother, and they suspect that she was either the one that did this or that she is dead somewhere. An unknown uncle in prison is at number 9. This scary family secret comes from Reddit. Apparently this person had an uncle in prison, but no one in her family ever told her what he was serving time for. The family never talked about him, and if he was brought up in conversation, everyone would just simply change the topic. But one night, she was watching a TV documentary about horrific crimes that happened in Perth, Australia. And guess what? One of them was about David and Catherine Burney and how they brutally murdered a call girl. Well, as it turns out, this guy had the exact same name as her uncle in prison. Could this be the same guy? Could this be your uncle? Well, she turned to her mom, who said, "So I guess you could put the 2 together. Well, I guess that's one way to find out that you have an uncle who murdered someone." Not the best way of finding out, but yeah. The murderous couple is in at number 8. Gerald and Alice Uden appear to be the most wholesome couple. They regularly attended church, and they seem to be super nice, genuine. They're very generous people. Well, don't be fooled by them, because both of them were hiding their own deep, dark secret for decades. Apparently they were both married to other people they met before. Alice shot her husband in the head and then decided to hide his body in a gold mine. Whereas Gerald confessed to shooting his ex-wife and stepchildren with a rifle that she had bought him as a present. I mean, is this real life right now? What are the odds of these two people finding each other? Did they meet at a Killed My Spouse group meeting, or maybe they swiped right on the Kill Me app or I've Killed Before app? It's also crazy how many years went by before they were finally caught by the police. This story is absolutely insane. Next up on our list, at number 7, antifreeze. A mother and daughter confessed to poisoning members of their family with antifreeze. Let me give you guys a quick backstory. The father died without warning, so they attributed it to natural causes. Well, 5 months later, her autistic son died from what seemed to be seizure-related complications. And then the following year after that, her daughter needed emergency medical attention, and this is for an organ failure. Yeah, something about this just doesn't seem right. The family's pastor thought so too, so he reached out to local law enforcement, who were able to get a confession out of her. And her motives were pretty messed up. She wanted her husband gone because of his temper. She couldn't deal with her autistic son, and her daughter racked up too much debt from college. So she had to go as well. She was gonna keep her other 2 daughters because she so loved them. But get this, the police found a diary belonging to her youngest daughter, and she wrote about how she helped her mother plan and execute the murders, and her goal was to eliminate the entire family until it was just her and her mother left. I mean, I can't even deal with this messed up family, so let's move on. The closet child comes in at number 6. For 3 years, a young boy was hidden inside of a locked closet while he was sedated by sleeping pills given to him by his mother. When neighbors asked Veronica Aguilar where her son was, she told them that he was placed in an institution in Mexico. But her 3 other children, who slept on a bed just outside of the closet door, knew the truth. But they were forbidden by their mother from saying anything to anyone. Sadly, this little boy's life came to an end when police finally discovered his malnourished body inside of the closet. It's insane because so many people, like teachers, social workers, therapists, they all knew that he was a victim of abuse, but somehow they lost track of him, and because of their carelessness, his mother was able to lock him inside of a closet for a very long time, until he ultimately passed away. Number 5, we have a crazy story about a girl who was raised by a man who killed her parents. Victoria Montenegro thought that her adoptive parents were kind and generous people who took her in after her real parents were killed in a shootout in Buenos Aires in 1976. Well, as it turns out, that was a complete lie. When she turned 24 years old, she discovered that the couple who raised her was part of the military regime responsible for her parents' disappearance. Her birth parents were actually abducted, abused, and assassinated by this group when she was only 4 months old. So her adoptive father took this opportunity to falsify her documents, hide her identity, and raise her as his own. This is just so messed up, so twisted. All of these years, she was being raised by a family that actually killed her parents and stole her identity. A serial killer in hiding brings us to number 4. Back in 1971, 13-year-old Charlie Brandt went into a full homicidal rampage. Without any warning, he shot his father in the back and then shot his pregnant mother while she was in the bath. He went to kill his other sister, but luckily his gun jammed. His father barely survived the shooting, but his mother wasn't so lucky. But because of his age, prosecutors never charged him with his mother's death. He was able to walk free and live a normal life. His family never brought up that night ever again, and he just went on as nothing ever happened. Well, in 2004, Brandt went on to brutally stab his wife 7 times in the chest, and he even decapitated her and ripped her heart out. Afterwards, he committed suicide. It's crazy because no one knew that he had serial killer tendencies except for his family, who kept his secret after all of these years. Now at number 3, dead bodies in the garage. Darren West spent 10 years of his life thinking that he only had 3 children with his ex-wife. But in 2006, this reality was shattered. He was serving time in prison for drug charges, but he was being released. While he was making arrangements to stay with his ex-wife, he came to the shocking truth. He found a dead baby in her garage, and it wasn't the only one. Between 1996 and 2006, Megan Huntsman had secretly given birth to 7 babies, and she choked them all to death. She turned her garage into a makeshift graveyard and kept this family's secret for years. As it turns out, she was addicted to meth, and that was her motive for killing these poor kids. I just can't believe that she was able to hide her pregnancy and murders this whole time. She probably would have taken this dark secret to her grave. The Turpin children makes its way onto this list at number 2. David and Louise Turpin managed to abuse their 13 children for years until one daughter was able to escape and tell the police. These poor kids were in such a controlling and abusive environment and had to do whatever it took to survive. In the media, their house was being called a house of horrors because some of the children were so far removed from the world. I mean, they didn't even know what medicine or the police were until they were finally rescued. They were only fed once a day and given a shower once a year. No one in the neighborhood had any idea what was going on inside of that house, and the parents managed to get away with this for a very long time. They're able to get away with their dark secret for many, many years. Now at number 1, we have a girl who was held captive for 24 years. This next story is a pretty famous case that emerged back in 2008. A woman named Elizabeth Fritzl, well, she told police that she had been captive for the past 24 years by her own father. Joseph Fritzl had assaulted, abused, and hurt her numerous times during her, imprisonment inside of her family basement. His abuse resulted in the birth of 7 children, where 3 of them remained in captivity with Elizabeth. One of them died shortly after birth, and Joseph disposed of his body in an incinerator, and the other 3 were brought up by him and his wife as their own. This secret went on for 24 years until finally the police discovered what was really going on. The story is so much more messed up, but I definitely don't want to get into all the horrific details. All I know is that Elizabeth is finally free, and I hope that one day she'll be able to move past this. I feel so bad.
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have Let's Celebrate. Okay, so this story is one wild ride, and it is honestly actually pretty terrifying. One night, a young woman was coming home late after she had been out having a few alcoholic beverages. Her creepy neighbor unfortunately witnessed this and for some reason decided to head to her front door with her. Her birthday had recently passed, and so when her weird neighbor tried to give her a hug, she just assumed it was him trying to be nice, but things quickly got even more strange. As she was trying to get into her own home, he kept insisting he should come in and have a drink with her so that they could celebrate more appropriately. Absolutely not. This woman was thinking quick because she decided to tell him that she couldn't find her keys, and then she quickly pulled out her phone and she said she was calling someone who might have them. She was actually calling her cousin though, and she told him how scared she was. He lived close by, so he jumped out of bed and drove really quickly to come and pick her up. I wish this was the end of the story, but she explains that shortly after this creepy night, her neighbor actually ended up poisoning one of her dogs just out of pure pettiness. That is so insane. In our number 9 spot today, we have the upstairs neighbor. Before I dive into this one, guys, please don't forget to hit the thumbs up button if you're enjoying the video so far, because it really helps us out. This story comes from someone who explains that they live in an apartment building. Their neighbors directly above them are the ones having some extremely fishy behavior. Apparently, it is not abnormal to hear this couple screaming and arguing with each other, which is quite a thing to have to get used to. But here's where things turn sinister. Our storyteller explains that she hasn't seen the wife for at least 3 months now, which obviously isn't normal. And now, suddenly, the husband says that he's going to Malaysia for a while, but our storyteller feels like he's going forever, considering he is also selling his apartment. And we still don't know where the wife is. I'm hoping that maybe they just decided to separate since they were obviously arguing all the time, and that nothing more sinister is going on here. If I was their neighbor, I'm sure my mind would definitely be racing as well, though. In our number 8 spot today, we have this suspicious behavior. This story starts off with a description of the family next door. There are 3 of them, a husband, a wife, and their 2-year-old daughter. Apparently, the husband has always been super weird and gave off some bad feelings. He had a really expensive car, and apparently basically all he did was drive it and wash it. So, one day, the police came knocking on our storyteller's door, and the police explained that apparently the husband and wife next door had supposedly gotten a divorce, but they wanted to know if they happened to know the whereabouts of the wife and daughter because they could not locate them. Our storyteller didn't know anything about their whereabouts, but gave what info she did know, which was that she had a 2-year-old and that she was maybe pregnant and that she drove a white Jeep. After this police visit, they didn't hear anything else, but of course kept their eyes and ears peeled. A few months after the police visit, the creepy husband is outside cleaning his expensive car, and this is when our storyteller sees the wife's white Jeep in the garage of the house. If she had run off, why would she leave her car? The creepy husband saw our storyteller see the Jeep, and just a few short days later, he ended up selling it. This could all just be a coincidence, but it certainly is all a little suspicious. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Skull Stealer. This next story is one that our storyteller luckily didn't have to witness, but it definitely is still quite strange. Apparently, this neighbor man was out and about searching for gold one day, and on his way back, he ended up being pulled over for some reason. The police ended up searching this man's car when they found something I don't think anyone was expecting. They found a real human skull. Sinister or not, why would you ever have something like that in the back of your car? This guy's excuse is that he found it while he was out searching and thought it belonged to an Indigenous American. This man was most definitely arrested, and unfortunately, our storyteller doesn't know how the rest of this story panned out, but if it wasn't already clear, if you ever find a human skull, please don't take it home with you. In our number 6 spot today, we have Always Watching. This story is about the family that lived across the street from our storyteller when they were in high school. Our storyteller would walk to and from school every day, and while the mornings were normal, when he was coming home every day is when things got very weird. This family across the street would sit and stare out the window at this guy every single day as he returned from school. I couldn't imagine this happening to me once, let alone every single day, but that truly sounds like an absolute nightmare. To make things just a little more strange, it apparently wasn't uncommon for them to get phone calls from their scary neighbors' phone numbers, but when they answered, there just wasn't anyone on the other end. I feel like I would have immediately put my house up for sale or something, because every night I would feel like I would need to sleep with one eye open. In our number 5 spot today, we have Stay Away. This story comes from someone who had some weird neighbors when they were around 9 or 10 years old. The people who actually lived next door were a middle-aged couple, and while they didn't have any kids of their own, they had 3 nieces who were around the same age as him, so they would play together often. One day, the couple invited our storyteller to church with them. There isn't necessarily really anything inherently wrong with that, but what happens next is where things turned a little strange. This couple then proceeded to explain why this child should come to church with them, which already sounds creepy. They began to explain that the world was about to end and that they were preparing for that. These fully grown adults literally told the child that if he wanted to live, he should go to church with them. I have a strong feeling that if he wanted to live, the best thing to do would be to absolutely not go to church with them under any circumstances. Who knows what church they were going to, but there's no way it was good. In our number 4 spot today, we have this dangerous fence. This story comes from someone from a family with 4 siblings for a total of 5 kids. They were all pretty rambunctious and unfortunately had the pleasure of living next to a family with 2 children, both of which were, of course, very well behaved. Obviously, the neighbor dad didn't take too kindly to living next door to a bunch of wild children, considering he had 2 perfect little angels. But he certainly took things way too far. One day our storyteller was climbing around on the fence that separated the 2 properties, and this set off the neighbor dad. Instead of doing literally anything normal, he decided to do one of the most messed up things he could. He took those nails that are used for carpets to grip the flooring and stuck them in bars of wood, which he then placed on top of the fence. Keep in mind that our storyteller is around 5 years old at this time. So every time he would try to climb to the top, he would be stuck by a nail, which would then cause him to fall off. Luckily, our storyteller never got seriously injured or anything from this, but how weird is it for the neighbor dad to react like that? In our number 3 spot today, we have the Rose Garden. This story comes from someone's aunt and is about a neighbor she had in the 70s and 80s. This neighbor was harmless but had quite a creepy pastime. This neighbor volunteered at a blood bank, which is obviously great, but since the 70s and 80s were pretty much just a free-for-all, there was an insane blood bank rule that allowed this neighbor lady to be able to take home the bags of blood that were expired and would be thrown out. I truly cannot believe that was a thing, but I guess this lady was resourceful. She would take these bags of blood and then use them as fertilizer for her garden. Our storyteller's aunt explains that you would see her out there on her knees, digging around with a big floppy sun hat, just working human blood into the soil around her roses. They end off this story by explaining that all of the flowers in her garden were truly magnificent, and I guess maybe she really was onto something. In our number 2 spot today, we have the next door dentist. This story comes from someone whose neighbor was a dentist, and he lived with his wife, and they apparently had one creepy child. Our storyteller explains that this weird family next door once absolutely freaked out on them for planting some flowers alongside their fence. They didn't go into detail about why, but the dentist family screamed as they said they didn't want anyone digging up their land. That's a reasonable request for sure, but also very, very suspicious. The dentist family ended up moving out 2 years after this strange incident, and our storyteller didn't really think much of them until 3 years after that. In an absolutely wild but not surprising turn of events, the dentist's dad ended up being arrested for kidnapping his patients. Our storyteller still has never had confirmation, but truly believes that there are still bodies located down there. In our number 1 spot today, we have Peeping Tom. Okay, so this one is truly one of the creepiest things I have ever heard. This story comes from a man who lives with his wife, and they have a downstairs neighbor who is certainly something else. First, this creepy neighbor approaches the wife and says to her that he can hear her and her husband all the time, with a super creepy and sinister grin on his face, which is absolutely horrifying to even think of. This is already creepy, but this story unfortunately gets worse. One day the wife was painting the porch of the house and accidentally dropped a paintbrush. She bent down to pick it up and sadly had to see what no one should have to see. Through the slits in the deck, she saw this creepy neighbor's eyes staring up at her. Tell me why this creepy man was laying under the porch, staring up at her, being a weirdo Peeping Tom. They have no idea how long he was there for, and honestly, they probably don't even want to know.
Coming in at number 10, we have this tie-dye dream. This family not only makes this list for the sheer awkwardness of this situation, but they also win the award for the most horrifyingly coordinated family in the world. I can't tell whether it's Christmas or whether this kid simply wants to express some individuality. I'm also not 100% understanding the family dynamic here either. Also, I want to be able to read what's embroidered on their shirts, but I can't quite. I think it says "Weeby Mummy," which actually is awkward in a whole new kind of place. Coming in at number 9, we have this family who look like they may or may not have contracted the plague. Why are they so purple? I'm really confused. Absolutely nobody in this family picture wants to be here. No one. The 2 boys look like they're suffering a high fever and they're about to vomit, and the grandma looks like she's just seen Phil Mitchell resurface at the Old Vic and she's about to go give him a piece of her mind. And she's taking the baby for backup. And then we have the mum who's looking sideways into an alternative reality where she just doesn't have to deal with this kind of BS. Okay, coming into number 8, I kind of have no idea what to say about whatever the F is happening in these 2 family portraits, other than, no, I still have nothing to say. What is going on? I really am out of words. I guess these 2 ethereal godlike dudes take their job as head of the family very seriously. They really do embody the white middle class male of the 1980s. What a golden era. Also, why so serious? Here we are at number 7 and things are getting pretty naked. Nudity can be great, but around your family, I mean, it's just all kinds of mentally scarring. Does anyone actually have any idea what the dynamic is here? Having your breasts cupped by one man whilst another holds your naked, bulging, pregnant belly, I mean, I've got some questions. Who does this baby belong to? I'm with the kid and his toy turkey. I just want to stay well away from this one. More nudity coming in at number 6. Hip hip hooray. Mummy, why isn't Daddy in the photo? Oh, well he will be in a minute. Just keep, looking forward. Like, at what point does Dad need to adopt the naked man pose? Without this Rudy nudie in the background, I'm thinking this probably could have been a nice picture, but Dad, put it away. Coming into number 5, we have a full-on back tattoo. This dude could pose for a family portrait all by himself, as he has the faces of his wife and 2 kids tattooed to scale on his back. Wow. Better not have any more kids though, as I don't think there's actually any space for them to join in the ink portrait. So I'm guessing that that's Lisa at the back, and then Zadie on the right, and little Nutella on the left? I wonder if they all have a huge tattoo of him on their back in return. This is so creepy. At number 4, we have a pretty awkward PDA. Grandma, Grandpa, can you just, stop it. As if putting these matching outfits on weren't embarrassing enough, we have to deal with Grandpa's weird pensioner leg flexibility and the full-on pash happening with Grandma. A family who have clearly been taking fashion tips from our family at number 4. Coming in at number 3, we have a serious dose of double denim. Only in North America do we see this kind of scene. So many questions. Why the Canadian tuxedo? And why is everyone bundling on Dad? How is he not getting crushed by his 4 fully grown kids? This picture, seriously. I have to say though, wherever they are, it looks amazing. Coming in at number 2, we have a family that clearly took inspiration from our family before, but took it to a whole new extra level. Hello, Rainbow family. This picture actually gets more awkward from the bottom up. Okay, the kid in the purple looks pretty cute and is definitely having fun. Then the kid in the blue is still kind of down with it all, but the kid in the green is closing her eyes and just wishing that they could be uninvited from their own family life. Then at the very top, what is happening with the dad? This is a whole new level of nope. But it does make me chuckle. Finally, coming in at number 1, this family certainly wants you to be their guest. Yes, yes they do. The low-budget Beast costume is killing me. I love it, it's so good. Those fangs, what? Also, the mum is Mrs. Potts and one of the kids is Belle. What kind of twisted family is this? Beast and Belle are together, right? I am all about the Lumiere pose. I'm thinking that this person is like a zany aunt, the person who probably came up with this whole concept in the first place. Then we have Cogsworth and Chip, and they're kinda cute. I would say overall, A for effort, A+++ for cringe.